Welcome to the podcast where passion and purpose collide. We are here today with Rebecca Monet of Zoracle Profiles. I'm Elizabeth Denham of the Franchise Woman, and we have a special guest we can't wait to talk to. Rebecca, tell us who it is.
Oh my goodness. Stan Friedman, my mentor, my cheerleader. I am so glad to have Stan. So let me tell you a little bit about Stan Friedman. He's a 32-year franchise executive, a veteran franchisor, and he's also the president of FRM Solutions, a franchise-centric technology company. So FRM enables franchisors to better manage their relationships with prospective and existing franchisees. Stan also offers consulting services on a limited basis. So I suggest folks check that out, to both emerging franchisors and suppliers that are new to the franchise space. So Stan is a member of the IFA Supplier Board, a founding board member of the IFA Diversity Institute. He serves on the IFA Educational Foundation's Leadership Council and was recently elected to its board of trustees. His home is in Atlanta, and Stan serves on the board of the Southeast Franchise Forum, leading its membership committee. In 2011, the IFA honored Stan with its Ronald E. Harris Diversity Award, and I want to talk about diversity. Now, this was only awarded 7 times before in the 60-year history of the IFA. Now, on top of all of that, Stan also hosts the ever-popular Franchise Today podcast. It's a weekly show that features C-level franchisors, franchisees, and suppliers, all that share nuggets with the audience about how they achieve sustainable growth through sensible franchising. So welcome, my dear friend, Stan, to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you, and I think we've got some great topics in store.
Yeah, but before we kind of dig deep, I want to lay a foundation because you're kind of the king of diversity. But could you give us a backdrop of how you got into this whole diversity movement, let's call it? I know you had a history with Tony Conza at Blimpies. Can you tell us the backstory, and then going forward, why you're so involved in all things diversity?
Well, I got involved, as you said, when I was at Blimpie. That would have been probably 1997, thereabout, maybe 96, 97. And one of the guys that was the founding board members and executives of Blimpie is now gone, long gone. His name was Chuck Linus. Chuck then was the president of the New York State Restaurant Association, and he was also on the board of directors of the IFA. Chuck made an offer of employment to me as National Franchise Development Director and said, you're going to have 2 jobs. You're obviously going to have your minimum 40 hours a week working for Blimpie, but then you're going to also pledge at least 40 hours a month to the International Franchise Association. And I said, what's up with that? So, and prior to that, I didn't know much about the IFA. I'd been in franchising many years prior, but in real estate franchising, there was really no nexus with IFA. So Chuck basically told me, I sit on the board, I get all the credit, my executives do all the work. And so I was one of 3 executives that had to make a commitment to do committee work. And what Chuck wanted from me was, he wanted to seat me on what was then called the Minorities in Franchising Committee. There was no Diversity Institute yet. Mm-hmm. And Hoboken, New Jersey was the birthplace of Blimpie Subs and Salads, and their early stage growth was mostly in inner cities in the Northeast. And so he wanted me to get involved with the Minorities in Franchising Committee, which turned out to be a turning point in my life, because I've since met people, been exposed to opportunities that would never have come my way. And I've developed so many relationships through this work in diversity. It took me to the White House. I mean, come on.
I know. How exciting is that?
Tony Conza and I got invited as the only private sector company in the summer of 1998 to participate in Clinton's White House Conference for Community Empowerment. And I will tell you, in my entire career in franchising and in franchise sales, this is the only time in my life where I actually had people throwing business cards at me saying, I have to hear from you. We have to talk. Because we were, Blimpie was doing then, and what I got my board to agree to was to award up to 200 Blimpie franchises in certain marketplaces designated by the government then as either urban empowerment zones or renewal communities or federal empowerment zones. Mm-hmm. And these were communities where there were very, very lucrative tax credits available if you opened a business and created jobs inside of those zones. In many cases where hard to find real estate in the suburbs, it made great business sense to take a look at the inner city where rent wasn't quite the factor that it would be out in the burbs. Mm-hmm. And then when a franchisee would get a business open, a Blimpie or anything else out in the suburbs, the next biggest problem in his life, now that he got the door open, is finding help. Because when kids are driving mom's BMWs, they don't want to go slice salami and make sandwiches. So labor was always a problem in the suburbs, which in the inner city would not be the case. And so there were some compelling cases to be made for why coming into the inner city and developing opportunities within the city with residents of the city. You don't go importing people into the inner city from the suburbs, but there was a business case to be made for diversity in franchising and how you could come into inner cities, have plentiful opportunity for real estate that's affordable, to have labor that can be trained and is willing and wants jobs and wants work. And you've got underserved consumers that are currently getting on buses and taking long rides to find services that should be available to them in their local communities, but most of the time we're not. Yeah. So it was a business case. And that business case is something that I continue to preach and literally tell people all the time that I don't have any authority over your moral, social, or political compass. But as a franchise development person, and anybody who's listening or watching knows that if we're in FranDev and we hear from one of our peers about a lead source that's delivering for them and delivering big, and we're not participating in it yet, we are next week, aren't we? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the way I approached this. Was I saw opportunities where you can help what otherwise might be on a marginal financial application, but with assistance through tax credits and with assistance through the SBA took our program at Blimpie and actually they recognized the franchise fee that we were waiving as owner equity. So immediately any candidate came in with like $18,000 enhancement to his personal net worth. And that helped get several of them over the finish line that would otherwise not have made it. So, it was just it was a kind of a program that was a little bit outside the box. I will tell you that it was put upon me that I hit a certain number that first year. We were still publicly traded back then. BLM, which is Black Lives Matter now, was Blimpie's American Stock Exchange.
What a coincidence, right?
But literally, I had a mandate. I had to hit a big number for the year, and that number was not going to be easily attainable without some creativity and outside of the box thinking. And it was through my knowledge of these credits that I went outside the box and got the board to agree. They at first were not real happy with the new guy that was in this new role. They thought they hired a crackhead or something. Are you crazy? You want to give away up to 200 franchises? Do the math on that. What are you thinking about? Well, the reality is, in the places that we were going to go with these franchises, we weren't seeing applicants waving checks at us from Sweet Auburn in Atlanta or Rosa Parks Boulevard in Detroit. And so we were creating incremental opportunities to create revenue streams, continuing revenue streams, recurring revenue streams. And if you looked at it in that venue, you'd be adding to our bottom line, not giving something up that isn't in your hands to give you. You don't have that revenue now at all. So we waived the initial fee. We helped some people who might otherwise never have learned that they could own their businesses and thus own their lives. And we create win-win-win scenarios, both for the new franchisee, for the community that they'll serve, for the people that will have jobs that didn't know that they could work in a store and be trained, And, for us and our investors, we were doing something that was over the top and a little bit different, and it gave us a leg up on a competitive
Wow.
edge in a space that, Subway owned and then Quiznos owned. And so it stirred the pot and made some noise, and it helped me get introduced to something that has then become a very incrementally important part of my life.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I hope other franchisors followed in your footsteps, because this is an out-of-the-box solution to jobs, business ownerships, serving communities that are probably underserved, providing opportunities that weren't considered before. So hopefully you're a trendsetter.
Well, I was probably early on and doing some creative things to get it done, but I wasn't the only one. There were many franchisors that preceded Blimpie's involvement in this space. I think we were probably a little more aggressive and a little more creative in approaching what we were doing, but there were several concepts and brands that were trendsetters. And, there were 6 or 7 people who got that diversity award before I did. So, I wasn't number one.
You're number one in our book.
There you go. Thank you.
Well, you talk about it becoming an integral part of your life and your career and your perspective. How did all of that impact you on a personal level? Because it's one thing to talk about it in a business, the success of the program. But how did it impact you or change a perspective or make you feel satisfaction at being able to help an underserved community?
It's, I believe that it's something that we're not as conscious of on a day-to-day basis than that we should be more conscious of. As I say, I don't ever feel like I have any authority over somebody's moral, social, political compass, but I then too had none over my own. I never thought about diversity, or I never thought about working in a minority program, but through the interaction with these programs and with those that I met and got to participate with, I learned a lot. And I still, there's one argument that I feel no person can win with me. It's one case in point when people talk about, white privilege and say that's bogus, or that a lot of people don't understand what that really means. Because it is unconscious. It's not that we walk around saying, well, I've got white privilege. No, it's we were born with advantages that others of Black and brown skin don't enjoy. And so there's the talk always about the talk that African-American fathers have with their children about what to do if they get into an interaction with a police officer, how to behave, what to speak about, how to show respect. And the mere fact that is necessary, that a conversation like that has to occur for a father or parent to feel safe, that they're giving their children the protection that they need to not be the wise guy who's going to walk out with a group of people and maybe have 2 strikes against them because of the color of their skin, that we don't have to worry about those things. I didn't have that conversation with my son. Well, I call that white privilege. And
well, it is white privilege. And I think that I don't have those conversations with my sons either. The closest I can come to understanding fear for your child just for being who they are is that having a gay son. I fear for him in different ways than I feel for my other children, because he is a target. He's not as obvious a target, though. He's not walking around cloaked by his skin that is different from everybody else's. But I told this story before. My husband owns a Patch Boys franchise and has a Black man work for him. And he's a very large Black man, sweetest teddy bear kind of guy. But he had a customer who she worked nights, and she said, just tell your guy to come in the back door. I'm going to stay asleep. If you need me, just, have him tell you to call me. And he stood on the back porch debating whether he was going to go in the back door. This is in Mobile, Alabama. He was afraid to go in because he thought someone would think that he was breaking in or lurking on a white person's property. And my husband said, she's really nice. I think you're going to be fine. he didn't want to force him to do something he felt uncomfortable with, but he said, I really do think this girl is nice. And it wasn't just the girl he was worried about, it was the neighbors. So I think one of the things that helps people bridge understanding is knowing people personally. When you have an employee that you care about and has been nothing but a great worker, feel that kind of fear just to do something that my husband would walk in that back door without a second thought.
Right.
You know, those demonstrations, if you don't have that personal experience, I think some people are able to dismiss it a little bit easier.
Well, I think people too, you know, we tend to go to the emotional side of situations, and we tend to be influenced by the emotional side of situations. So we see what we see on TV, and you see riots and you see destruction, and we respond to that and we react back to that, and nothing good comes from any of that, in my view. And it doesn't, you know, we are whatever else we are or aren't or have been or should be, we're still a nation of law. And without that, there's no place that anybody wants to come and be. But why do immigrants still want to come and be? So this is a land of opportunity, and it's far from perfect today. And in its history, it's been far from perfect in getting where we are today. But I don't believe in erasing where we've been. I believe in learning from where we've been.
Absolutely.
And if there are still statues of generals from the Confederate Army that are sitting in front of court buildings, I find that to be wrong. I don't think those statues should be ripped down, and I don't think that they should be made to disappear. But I don't think the meta message there is a bad one. If you put a statue in front of a courthouse of a Confederate general, you're saying something to an African American that's you're not equal at all, and this is a symbol of that. Put it in a museum and learn from it. Keep history intact. If we don't keep history intact, we cannot learn from our mistakes. If we can't learn from our mistakes, we're just going to do them again. And let's not do that at all.
So, but you mentioned that we're a country of law, and it's what allows us to be civilized in many different ways. So going back to this idea of the statutes or any other buildings or businesses that are being destroyed by this movement, right, by this revolution, let's call it BLM, there's got to be a way to communicate that unhappiness and this injustice another way without destroying businesses. We were on a call, Elizabeth and I, with Tamara Kennedy, and she owns 9
in Minneapolis. Yep.
In Minneapolis. So she was in the heart of this, and it broke her heart for many reasons, in that she has employees that are black and brown and white and yellow, right? And with things being destroyed, they're now unemployed, or they are the only ones employed because mom and dad have been laid off because of the coronavirus. So to me, there's another way to communicate. I'm unhappy. Use law, use argument, use debate, use something to say we don't want that particular statue up, or this is unjust and unfair. So what are your opinions? That's just my opinion, but what are your opinions about the methodology that the rioters and the protesters are using? Some are peaceful, of course, but what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are simple, and they're no different than politics. There are many, many shades of gray. There's not just black and white. There are many shades of gray. And so in my view, we've had elections with outcomes that I've not been happy with. We've had elections where I've given high fives and said, whoopee, we got it, right? In no case, though, and this is something that makes America great, we've never had riots after an election. 2016 was probably the most polarizing election in my lifetime. Everyone that was on one side was deep in, and everyone that was on the other side was deep in. But we didn't see anything happen like third world nations when one side didn't get what they wanted, or it didn't go the way they favored or hoped it would. So I believe that there are ways to fix these issues that some people are now awakened to can look back over our history, and they can say that they can see that some of the things that have happened in our history were not the way that they'd be done today. And we can fix a lot of this. We can't change it. We can fix it, though, and learn from it. And we can legislate change, and we can have executive orders that make change. But you can't have rioting in the street, because that just creates another paradigm in the minds of those viewing it that give them anything but reason to want to step over a line and say, I'm going to meet you and look at life through your point of view. We got to stop looking at symptoms, and we have to really get focused on root causes. And the root cause in all of this is so well explained by my guest from a couple of weeks ago on my podcast, a gentleman named John Hope Bryant. And he is the founding head of a nonprofit called Operation Hope. And Operation Hope focuses on nothing but financial dignity, and it focuses on how our country is built on finance, and our economy is driven by money. And there's a whole race of people that just didn't get the memo about how to do what our immigrant ancestors did coming over here as merchants, coming here from Europe or Eastern Europe as entrepreneurs, where we've had legacy, we've had a chance to grow and learn. What John Hope Bryant proffers is that African-American generational issues of African-American kids didn't grow up with entrepreneurs. Their legacy was slavery. And literally without an understanding or without knowledge of how economy and financial markets work, that African-American kids today, if they're not growing up with that education and being given an equal opportunity for the education, then they're nothing better than modern day slaves, because they can't break the paradigm of understanding how to work with money and how to make a change in their lives that takes them off the need for welfare, takes them off the need to be dependent on government, and enables them to become contributors to the economy. And we could actually turn the whole economy around, maybe even get rid of the national debt, doing some things that not only fix the problem of what someone who's trapped in a world of a 500 or 550 credit score, get them to a 650 or a 700, and they're bankable. And now you can start looking at life through a different lens, and you are no longer trapped into a finite world, but you've got opportunities now equal to and equivalent to others who can go get businesses started, and so could you. So root causes to me are where I'd love to see more focus and more attention, and less of the drama, which is, I can't argue with what the frustration is. I can't say that I understand completely what that feels like, but what I can say definitively is we live in America, and we should operate and function in ways that are within the lines, and let's all get as much done as we can properly and cause a lot less heartache and hurt for innocent people whose businesses and livelihoods have been hurt as collateral damage. And in many cases, in the neighborhoods where these businesses are owned by African Americans, and we are destroying property that belongs to members of that community. And so where is the percentage in any of that? To me, it makes no sense.
True. I like the solution here that your guest shared in the Franchise Day show, and then you shared with us, is the solution really is financial education, understanding and encouraging entrepreneurship and business ownership and creativity and innovation. It really is that. And certain parts of our population, simply because of their history, didn't get that experience of understanding money or the free enterprise system, etc. It reminds me of a project I worked on in the late 90s when communism went away in Russia. We had a bunch of folks come in from a large oil company in Russia. And before we could even talk about franchising and business ownership, we had to teach them about the free enterprise system and about competition, and about innovation, and about creativity before they could truly begin to become franchisors. So interesting perspective. Thank you, Stan. You got me thinking. Elizabeth, did you have anything else to share on that? Because I wanted to make sure we got to the second part of this interview with
and
Stan.
here's what I'm thinking. I was thinking if Stan's up for it, we could do a part 2 and just finish with the success of the next 5 minutes or so, and then break and then do the next. We had another topic we wanted to address. Sure. Do you have time for that, Stan?
I do.
Absolutely, great. That'll give us another 5 or 10 minutes or so on this topic, and then we can take a quick break. But I think in addition to the financial education, one of the things I used to do Social Security disability and help people get their disability. And one of the things I learned, that was one of the most enlightening experiences I've ever had in terms of intimately getting to know people who did not grow up the way that I did, and just education in general and access and parenting. You know, the cycle is so deep for people who have not had the same kinds of access that we have. That financial education is great, but you also have to start back. One of my most memorable clients was this man who'd worked for Goodyear for 30 years. And I think when you stop and listen to experience it, it really impacts you. But when Obama got elected, he was my client. And I just said, what do you think about that? You know, and he said, now my children and grandchildren think they can. And part of it is what you touched on, that you offered businesses through Blimpie to people who may never have considered business ownership or thought it was outside of their reach. So I think some of those things are allowing it to be within people's reach with the ways that you were able to creatively help finance and give them, you know, waive the franchise fee or those sorts of things. But the people who say just bootstrap it, I mean, it's such a simple thing to say. But what I learned was, if I were in that situation and didn't have the parents that I have and the education that I have, I don't know if I could have done that. Mm-hmm. I mean, that requires a lot more than the average person can do or can overcome. So
you just have to give people, though, permission to believe that there is a dream attainable. We talk about this all the time with the IFA Diversity Board when we go out and we do programs in cities like Cleveland. We recently did one with Key Bank, and Key Bank, through their depositors and through members of the community in Cleveland that they're associated with, invited. We had about 100 or so people come to a program, half-day program. We had speakers talking about how you can own your business and own your life. And literally, when those who hear those kinds of public service messages on the radio hear them, or when they hear somebody saying you can own your business and own your life, what they do is they look over here and then look over here and say, well, who are you talking to? You can't be talking to me.
Yeah.
No, we are talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't always take $1 million to start a franchise business. You can actually start a franchise business for a lot less than that and go to work on your first $1 million. Mm-hmm. And so we get just a high level conversation. If you think that the crowd that is attracted at an MFV Expo or any of those franchise shows, if you think those are early adapters to the idea, these are even earlier than that, because at least those who come to the shows have proactively come to the shows. What we do is we sneak up on somebody with a message like that they weren't anticipating, and then we ask them to let that marinate a little bit, and let's have another conversation, high level, about how this can actually become a reality. And then we start to set up an agenda of subsequent meetings to bring you to a conference like the one that we did. And now you're coming with a little bit more attention and proactive engagement. And we bring people from SCORE, and from Key Bank brings their SBA people. And you know, there's just a number of people that start putting a little more meat on the bone to creating a vision for, this could really be real. I could do this. And they hear about 401k conversions. They learn about things that weren't known to them, much less known to be available.
So it's planting those seeds of possibility.
And for franchisors who put their focus on this with intention, you can't treat this, it's not the same as what you do now. It's a different approach to a different market, but if you do it with intention and you do it with purpose, there are tons of markets that you're flying past and fighting with others for real estate when there's real estate available in markets that you're just not looking at, or you're not paying attention to as being viable. Well, they are viable. And there are definitely people that need service in those communities. And if it doesn't come from you, then your next best competitor is going to best you by one, and maybe twice, 3 times or more, and do the same thing again, because it just makes nothing but sense.
Yeah.
Well, and not only that, with the franchise system, if you've got a franchisor who's willing to take that extra step and go that extra mile in these communities, then suddenly a person who may have no support, whether it's financial, physical, emotional, any of those things, suddenly has a team of people in their corner saying, not only can you do it, we're going to help you do it. And I think one of the things Rebecca and I talk about community is how hugely important that is for the success of anybody, but particularly people who are not feeling a part of the majority of the community.
Right. You do this through the network of churches, and you find prospective franchisees in those communities that are churchgoers, and you talk to the pastors and the preachers, and you start finding out who you can and talk with, and who you can find to have a conversation with. And literally, there are programs at the state and federal and sometimes even local programs to help enable a person to be able to get into business for themselves, create an opportunity for jobs in that marketplace, take what was a liquor store and turn it into a convenience store, take what was a check cashing store or a pawn shop and turn that into a bank branch or an ATM machine. And one storefront at a time, you're not only doing well by doing good, but you're changing the face of blighted neighborhoods and gentrifying America. I mean,
So
win,
true.
win, win.
You know, I think this is so important to instill that kind of optimism and hope in others, and a seed that says you can do it. And then, of course, I call franchising the last bastion of the free enterprise system, because it really is all that you mentioned, Elizabeth. But the other thing that I'm starting to notice is universities was always training you, and high schools were training you for a job. It's only been more recently that there are entrepreneurial programs, franchise programs that are now available at the university level, where you can study how to be an entrepreneur, how to be a franchisee. So if we begin to add that, take away everybody's got to have a job and fit into a certain kind of box, and realize there are other options besides jobs that are available, no matter what your skin color, no matter what your gender, no matter what your background, there are opportunities that are available. We just have to think about that. So I'm told by my co-host we need to wrap up.
We're hitting our time limit, but I'm excited that you have a little more time.
Yes.
And so we want to thank you for joining us on this segment. We're going to take a quick break and bring you right back.